Quick question, Representative Dean, you led the second impeachment. You were part of the second impeachment of President Trump. Is impeachment something that Democrats could consider or even be on the table at this point?
Well, I know you know that we went through two.
We
went through two impeachments with Donald Trump as a result of his high crimes and misdemeanors, just some of them, captured in the first term. As you all know, we are in the minority. So bringing forward impeachment right now, while he is guilty of a litany of high crimes and misdemeanors, I don't think it is a best use of our time. Let us get into the majority. Let us get a Senate majority and then hold this president to account. But for right now, I call upon, and I think about those days when I was a manager during the second impeachment and we made our closing arguments on the floor of the Senate. And what did Mr. McConnell do? And I say this to warn Leader Thune. You do not want to be in the same position that Mitch McConnell is in for all of history, voting not to convict the president for his high crimes and misdemeanors of inciting an insurrection at this very place.
What's happening, friends? Welcome Adam is here. So what's going on? This impeachment isn't reactive or chaotic like the first two. It's been built with cold precision. The articles are already drafted, numbered, sponsored, and entered into the official congressional record. The legal arguments have been published, endorsed by conservative editorial boards, and validated by top legal minds. The infrastructure is already assembled, already aimed, and already in motion.
Connecticut Congressman John Larson, who is up for re-election, has filed articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump. Larson says the move comes amid the unrest in the Middle East and the president's comments on social media recently this week. Fox 61's Joe Monte has more on the move.
Leaders, I'll start with John Larson. He filed articles of impeachment against the president, and he's also calling on the president's cabinet following this Iran war and some of the president's statements in recent times regarding Iran, some of the threats that he's made. He's calling to invoke the 25th Amendment. Now, what this would mean is that the vice president would basically take power, and this is typically used when the president dies or resigns or cannot discharge their duties. Now, Larson is calling for this because he says the president is putting our security at risk. Senator Chris Murphy joined in on these calls. Take a listen.
The president has promised to commit war crimes. He's promised to eradicate an entire civilization. We have never, ever seen that in the history of this country. That's why I and many other people have been talking for the last 24 hours about the 25th Amendment.
The only thing standing between Donald Trump and the gavel of an impeachment inquiry is the cold, hard math of the current Congress. And that math is about to change. The fuse is lit. The clock is ticking. And the leadership of the Democratic Party, from Hakeem Jeffries on down, is no longer whispering about accountability. They are openly warning in public statements and strategic leaks that the moment the balance of power shifts on Capitol Hill, the machinery of removal will be activated.
Donald Trump has failed America, failed the NATO alliance, and failed the free world. And he seems to confuse friend with foe. And the fact that Vice President Vance is over in Eastern Europe right now supporting an authoritarian dictator is extraordinary. The fact that Donald Trump and Republicans continue to play footsie with Vladimir Putin and Russia, sworn enemies of the United States of America, is extraordinary. And the fact that Donald Trump continues to attack our allies, whether it's Canada, Mexico, or NATO, is extraordinary. Something is really wrong with this guy. And that's becoming increasingly obvious to the American people.
We are standing on the precipice of a historic constitutional confrontation, and the trigger is a war launched without the consent of the American people's representatives. This is the story of how an unauthorized military strike on Iran has created the perfect, unassailable storm for impeachment. We are going to walk through the specific text of the resolution, examine the surprising voices calling for Trump's head, and dissect the political chess moves that have made this third impeachment not just possible, but effectively locked in.
Yesterday, more than 70 lawmakers in separate posts on social media suggested the president's cabinet must invoke the 25th Amendment and admit he's unfit for office. Congress should pass impeachment articles and vote to convict him, or both. During his first term, he was impeached twice and acquitted.
We reached out to state lawmakers, or those who represent California, to pose our accountability question asking, do you support President Trump's actions in Iran or oppose them? Here's what they told us. California Senator Adam Schiff says, quote, Congress must finally reclaim its war power from this increasingly dangerous president before more service members get killed.
Let's begin where all impeachment proceedings must begin, with a specific enumerated charge laid out in a formal House resolution. That document exists right now. It is designated H-Res 537. And it was drafted and introduced by Representative Al Green of Texas's 9th Congressional District.
Mr. Speaker, and still I rise. And I rise today in the name of government of the people, by the people, for the people. I rise today because our country is nearing a moment of decision. I rise because we are at the intersection of democracy and autocracy. I rise to announce that at this moment in time, I have filed H-Res 537. H-Res 537 is a privileged resolution. H-Res 537 has been filed because I believe that the President of the United States has committed an impeachable act.
Now, for those who have followed the arc of accountability over the last several years, the name Al Green should ring a very loud bell. This is not a man who jumps on a bandwagon when it is politically convenient. Representative Green has been a persistent, some would say relentless voice for holding this president accountable from the very beginning of his first term. When other members of his caucus were urging caution, when the conventional wisdom in Washington said impeachment was a political loser, Al Green was on the floor of the House, introducing articles and making the constitutional case. He was often a lone voice, or part of a very small chorus, but he never wavered. And that history matters immensely in this context because it shields this particular resolution from the accusation of mere partisan opportunism. You cannot claim Al Green is just riding a wave of sudden outrage about Iran. He has been building this constitutional record for years. He has been warning about the abuse of presidential power long before Operation Epic Fury was a gleam in the Pentagon's eye. And now, he has put pen to paper on H-Res 537, a document that specifically and exclusively targets the president's decision to authorize military strikes against Iran without first seeking or receiving a new authorization from the United States Congress. The language of the resolution is not vague. It does not meander through a list of political grievances. It goes straight for the constitutional jugular. It accuses the president of an abuse of presidential power and labels the military action an unconstitutional war. Let's sit with those two phrases for a moment, because they are the legal pillars upon which this entire impeachment edifice stands. The charge of abuse of power is familiar territory. It was the centerpiece of the first impeachment. It carries specific legal and constitutional weight. It means that the president used the immense authority of his office not for the national interest or the public good, but for an improper purpose. In this context, the improper purpose is the usurpation of the Congress's most sacred and exclusive power, the power to declare war. By launching a sustained military campaign without even the pretense of asking for permission, the resolution argues that Trump has treated the awesome machinery of the United States military as his personal plaything, to be deployed at his whim regardless of what the Constitution or the elected representatives of the people have to say about it. And then there is the phrase unconstitutional war. That is not hyperbolic rhetoric. It is a direct, legalistic description of the situation. The Constitution is not ambiguous on this point. Article 1, Section 8 explicitly vests the power to declare war in the Congress. The founders debated this extensively. They were terrified of the European model where a single monarch could drag a nation into endless, bloody, and expensive foreign entanglements. They deliberately stripped that power from the executive and placed it in the hands of the branch closest to the people. Over the decades, presidents have stretched the definition of hostilities and used the authorization for use of military force from decades ago as a blank check. But even those strained justifications require some tether to a prior congressional action. In the case of this specific Iran campaign, the argument is that there is no such tether. There is no declaration of war. There is no specific authorization. There is only the word of the president. And if the president's word is all that is required to send American service members into harm's way and to kill foreign civilians, then the Constitution's allocation of war powers is not just being stretched, it is being nullified, it is being rendered meaningless. And if nullifying a core provision of the Constitution is not a high crime and misdemeanor, then the impeachment clause itself has no meaning. This constitutional argument is not confined to the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. It is bleeding over into corners of the political landscape that should be sending shivers down the spine of every political strategist in the White House. Let's talk about the Orange County Register. For those who don't know California's political geography intimately, Orange County is not San Francisco. It is not West Los Angeles. It is historically the beating heart of suburban conservatism in the Golden State. It is the land of Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan. The editorial board of the Orange County Register is not a bastion of left-wing activism. And yet, in the aftermath of the Iran strikes, that editorial board published a piece that could have been written by the House Judiciary Committee's impeachment staff. They argued that Trump's unilateral decision to wage war in the Middle East defies the constitutional limits placed on the executive branch. They explicitly connected this defiance to the grounds for articles of impeachment, and they delivered the normative punchline that cuts through all the legal jargon. No president should be able to start a Middle East war alone. That single sentence from a conservative editorial page is more damaging to Trump's political defenses than 1,000 press releases from the Democratic National Committee. Why? Because it refutes the idea that this is just partisan sour grapes. It proves that the concern over executive overreach and unauthorized warfare is a matter of constitutional principle, not tribal political loyalty. There are conservatives in this country who still believe in the structure of the Constitution. They believe that the separation of powers is not just a suggestion for high school civics class, but a vital check against tyranny. And when they look at the Iran strikes, they see a president who has abandoned any respect for that check. When the Orange County Register says this meets the standard for impeachment, they are giving permission to other conservatives and moderate Republicans to entertain the idea. They are cracking the foundation of the unified GOP defense that has protected Trump in the past. This is an intellectual defection from the right, and it is a crucial component of making the third impeachment politically viable. And then we have the organized pressure from the civil society groups. Free Speech for People is not a new player in this arena. They are a constitutional advocacy organization with a deep bench of legal expertise. They have been involved in accountability efforts against this administration and others on issues ranging from corruption to the emoluments clause. But their statement regarding the Iran attack is notably severe and notably specific. They have formally called upon the United States Congress not just to censure the president, not just to hold a hearing, but to impeach and remove him from office. And they did not stop at the president. They extended that call to other key Trump officials involved in the planning and execution of the strikes. This could include the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Advisor, and perhaps even the commanding generals on the ground. The demand for a broader sweep of accountability is a strategic move. It signals that the constitutional violation was not the act of a single rogue actor, but a coordinated enterprise within the executive branch to bypass the legislature. It paints the entire operation as a conspiracy against the Constitution, and the language they use is designed to pierce the veil of strategic ambiguity that often surrounds military action. They call it a flagrant abuse of power. Flagrant is a word with a specific legal and moral connotation. It means open, brazen, and shameless. It means the administration didn't even try to hide what they were doing or concoct a plausible legal fiction. They simply acted, and they connect that flagrant abuse directly to the catastrophic civilian consequences. This is the part of the story that the Pentagon press releases try to downplay, but which advocates and legal experts are amplifying. We are not just talking about missiles hitting empty buildings or military targets. We are talking about the tragic and foreseeable loss of innocent life, the mention of a minimum school massacre, the death of children, the collateral damage of war. This is the human cost of an unauthorized war. And Free Speech for People is making the case that when a president launches a war without constitutional authority and that war results in the deaths of civilians, the moral and legal culpability is inescapable. Impeachment, in this framing, is not merely a political punishment. It is a moral necessity to account for the blood that has been spilled. The chorus is growing louder, and it is being amplified by mainstream outlets that track the pulse of the political and legal establishment. Newsweek has reported on the growing avalanche of impeachment calls coming from a wide array of strategists and legal experts in the wake of Operation Epic Fury. The operation's very name, Epic Fury, is now being used as the shorthand for the impeachment trigger. The critics cited in that reporting are not mincing words. They claim the Iran strikes infringed upon all boundaries on the use of force. That is a sweeping and devastating critique. It suggests that the president didn't just cross one line, he blew past every single legal guardrail that exists. There are multiple boundaries on the use of military force. The War Powers Resolution, which requires notification and a ticking clock for withdrawal, the appropriations power of Congress, which controls the purse strings for military action, and the fundamental constitutional requirement of a declaration of war. The argument being made by these legal experts is that the Iran strikes ignored all of them. It was a comprehensive failure to adhere to the rule of law. And if a comprehensive failure to adhere to the rule of law does not clearly fit high crime and misdemeanor standards, as the experts are quoted saying, then nothing does. This is the legal community providing the intellectual ammunition for the political battle to come. Now, let's pivot to the raw politics of Capitol Hill, because this is where the locked-in status becomes undeniable. The House and the Senate have both recently held votes on measures related to the Iran conflict. Specifically, there were war powers resolutions designed to force the president to come to Congress and get explicit permission before taking any further military action against Iran. These resolutions failed. They were defeated. But it is the margin of that defeat that tells the real story. In the House of Representatives, the vote to constrain the president was 212 in favor to 219 opposed. That is a 7-vote margin. In the United States Senate, the vote was 47 in favor to 53 opposed. That is a 6-vote margin. Let me translate what those numbers actually mean in the context of an upcoming election cycle. It means that right now, with Republicans controlling both chambers and with the immense pressure of party loyalty bearing down on every single member, a sizable block of legislators, nearly half the House and nearly half the Senate, was already willing to go on the record and say, "We do not trust the president with this war power. We want to take it away from him." If the margins are that close under Republican control, what happens when control flips? The midterm elections are not a distant event. They are the gravitational center around which all of this political maneuvering orbits. If Democrats pick up just a handful of seats, the 4 or 5 needed to secure a majority in the House and the few seats needed in the Senate, the math changes instantly. Those 212 votes in the House become the foundation of a new majority. Those 47 votes in the Senate become the baseline for a chamber that can actually pass legislation and conduct oversight with subpoena power. The close war powers votes were not just policy disagreements, they were dry runs. They were a public roll call of which members are willing to stand up to the president on matters of war and peace. And those lists of names are now being studied very carefully by Democratic leaders like Hakeem Jeffries. Axios and other political outlets have been reporting on the Democratic strategy with increasing clarity. The word from inside the Democratic caucus is one of strategic patience. They are not rushing to force an impeachment vote right now because they know they would lose, and a failed impeachment vote would hand Trump a massive political victory. He would claim total exoneration and the story would die. Instead, they are waiting for a better power balance. They are effectively keeping the impeachment engine idling in the driveway, waiting for the garage door of the midterms to open. Hakeem Jeffries, the House Democratic leader, has been dropping hints that are about as subtle as a sledgehammer. He has warned that if the Iran escalation continues, there will be strong support for impeachment-level accountability. In the coded language of Washington, impeachment-level accountability is a euphemism for actual impeachment. He is signaling to his caucus, to the White House, and to the public that the will is there, the desire is there. The only missing ingredient is the gavel. This brings us to the central thesis of this entire analysis. Impeachment is locked in politically, even if it is not procedurally active at this exact second. Think of it like a complex machine that has been fully assembled and tested, but is currently unplugged. All the pieces are in place. The articles are drafted. H. Resno 537 sits in the hopper, ready to be called up for a vote on the first day of a new Congress. The legal arguments are written. The op-eds in the Orange County Register, the white papers from constitutional scholars, the legal memos from groups like Free Speech for People. They have created a vast library of justification that any future impeachment manager can draw upon. The intellectual heavy lifting is done. Outside groups are demanding removal. The grassroots pressure is mobilized. Activists are ready to flood the phone lines and email inboxes of any member of Congress who wavers, and House leaders are waiting for the moment they can pull the trigger. This is the definition of locked in. It is a state of inevitable action pending a single predictable variable. That variable is the outcome of the next election. And if history and polling are any guide, the party in power faces significant headwinds. Trump's public support on the handling of foreign policy and these specific strikes is not robust. It is collapsing in key demographics. Allies and officials within the national security apparatus are reportedly resigning or expressing deep discomfort, adding to the sense of an administration adrift and acting unilaterally. The narrative is building, piece by piece, that the president has defied Congress on the most solemn duty it has, the power to send Americans to war, and that the only remedy left in the constitutional toolbox is removal. Let's dive a little deeper into the specific procedural and political dynamics that make this moment so different from previous impeachment efforts. There is the nature of the charge itself. Previous impeachments often got bogged down in complex financial transactions, obscure diplomatic protocols, or debates about the definition of obstruction. They required the public to follow a complicated paper trail. This charge is brutally simple and viscerally understandable. Did the president start a war without asking Congress? The answer is a clear, documented yes. Did American bombs fall on a foreign country without a declaration of war? Yes. Did civilians, including children, die as a result? Yes. That is a story that fits in a headline. It is a story that a candidate can explain to a voter at a town hall in 30 seconds. It cuts through the noise in a way that a complicated tax return or a phone call transcript simply cannot. The simplicity and gravity of the offense make it politically explosive. There is the institutional memory of Representative Al Green. The fact that he has been filing these resolutions for years, often to the annoyance of his own party's leadership, now serves as a powerful shield against the political vendetta attack. When Trump's defenders stand up and say, "This is just a partisan witch hunt," the response is immediate. Al Green has been trying to impeach this president since before the Iran war was a gleam in anyone's eye. This is about constitutional consistency, not the news cycle. Green's persistence, which was once seen as a quixotic sideshow, has been retroactively validated. He is no longer just the guy who kept filing papers. He is the prescient voice who saw the constitutional threat coming from miles away. This gives the current effort a moral continuity and a seriousness that a brand new, hastily drafted resolution would lack. Consider the role of the Senate. The close vote of 47 to 53 is not just about the House's ability to impeach, it's about the Senate's potential to convict. Conviction requires a 2/3 majority, 67 votes. That is a high bar. But it is not an impossible one if the political winds shift dramatically. The fact that 47 senators were already willing to vote to constrain the president suggests a deep well of concern. If the midterms flip the Senate and put Democrats in charge of the calendar, and if the evidence of a catastrophic, unauthorized war continues to mount, those numbers could move. It only takes a few Republican senators, perhaps those from more traditional constitutional conservative backgrounds, or those who are retiring and free from primary pressure, to break ranks. The impeachment managers in a Senate trial would not need to convince the entire Republican conference. They would only need to convince a handful. And the groundwork for that persuasion is already being laid by the likes of the Orange County Register editorial board and the legal experts cited in Newsweek. They are creating a permission structure for Republicans to vote their conscience rather than their party affiliation. We also must return to the human cost, because it is the element that transforms this from a dry constitutional dispute into a national trauma. Free speech for people's invocation of catastrophic civilian consequences is not an exaggeration. Wars have consequences, missiles miss their targets, intelligence is flawed, and when a president launches a war without the deliberative process that congressional authorization requires, he bypasses the very system designed to weigh those consequences. The deaths of innocent people in Iran are not an unfortunate side note to a story about legislative procedure. They are the direct result of a decision made by one man operating outside the constitutional framework. And holding that man accountable for those deaths is the ultimate purpose of the impeachment power. It is the mechanism by which the people's representatives say, "You do not get to make these decisions alone. You do not get to spend our blood and treasure on your own whim, and if you do, you will be removed." So here is the landscape as it exists right now. The administration is in a defensive crouch, lashing out at critics and trying to spin the military operation as a success. But outside the White House bubble, the machinery of the third impeachment is fully assembled and humming. Res. 537 is the legislative vehicle, parked and ready. Representative Al Green is the relentless driver, foot hovering over the accelerator. The Orange County Register and other conservative voices have provided the bipartisan intellectual cover. Free speech for people and the legal community have provided the moral and constitutional weight. And Hakeem Jeffries and the Democratic leadership are the strategists, watching the clock and waiting for the exact moment the math changes. The war powers votes have shown us the fault lines in the current Congress. Those fault lines are about to become seismic cracks. We are not watching a possibility unfold. We are watching an inevitability approach. The question is no longer whether the House will draft articles of impeachment for the Iran war. The articles are already drafted. The question is whether the calendar and the ballot box will deliver the final few votes needed to pass them and send this president to a third trial in the Senate. And based on every piece of documented evidence, every legal argument, and every political signal we have just laid out, the answer appears to be locked in.